What we are trying to do is we're working to improve achievement and attainment. We're working to equip our children and young people with skills for learning, skills for life and skills for work. And we're also aiming to improve the outcomes, the learning outcomes for the lowest performing 20% of our young people. We see the great importance of children understanding their learning and to be able to discuss their learning and to identify what they need to do to improve their learning. What we also see as important is children working together to support each other. So it's not just learning as an individual, but it's actually working together to support each other's learning. As part of this, we see it as important for a teacher to be able to support that process, to be able to identify what children are doing, to identify their strengths, and to identify what they need to do next in order to improve, and to support them in doing so. Vitally important in that, because clearly that's a big task for a teacher, so it's vitally important that teachers work together on this, and we see collegiality as important. But we also see it as important that teachers work together so that children can progress in the learning. We are looking at a distributive leadership model within schools. The role of the head teacher is vitally important, but we're looking at leadership at all levels. And what we're looking at within assessment would be probably three different parts. We're looking at, for example, assessment being absolutely part of learning and not separated from it, not a bolt-on. And therefore the work that we did in Scotland for many years on looking at formative assessment, assessment is for learning, it has been vitally important, and we still talk about assessment for learning as being fundamental to the process. The second part of that would be that we're actually looking for teachers to be able to moderate and to discuss together the quality of learning. Not just what the children produce, but also perhaps to plan together and to think through the pedagogy that they might use in the classroom, and then indeed to have a look at the evidence that's being produced, and then to perhaps link that back to the success criteria. And the third part would be looking at that holistic assessment and also looking at the development of skills. We're looking at the higher order thinking and looking for children that are creative, looking at children that know how to evaluate and actually developing those aspects of assessment.
Just when I think about assessment and how approaches to it have changed in Scotland, I started teaching in 1980, so I've been teaching a long time. And I think in recent years the biggest focus has been on seeing assessment not as something that happens after the learning, but it's something that's part of the learning. That as teachers we're looking at what we want the young people to learn, and we're thinking about how they can show us that they've learned it, and that's where the assessment fits in. The assessment is very much part of learning, and that's a process that we started working on in Scotland 10 years ago, and that's moved forward as we've started with the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence. So it's about looking at assessment and how, when we're planning the learning experiences in the classroom, we're really looking at how we can check if a young person has understood, is aware of what they've learned, and they're very much part of that assessment process. And that at different points we're sharing that learning and we're becoming aware of the extent to which the young person has learned what we want them to learn through a range of different ways now. Traditionally it might have been through a test where we would give them a mark out of 10 or a level, or an English maths subject, a grade in a piece of writing, whereas now we're assessing it all through the learning process. So at the very beginning we're sharing with the young people what they would need to be able to do to be successful in that particular learning experience. Through the learning process we're involving them in looking at their learning, looking at how they're shown their learning, and having some evaluation, assessment of their own work, sharing with other learners in the class, so there would be some peer assessment opportunities, and there will also hopefully be feedback from teachers in the course of the learning that's ongoing assessment feedback. And at different points we would give the young people a chance to apply that learning in different situations, and again reinforce our understanding that they have actually been involved in the learning and they know what they're learning. So I think for me the biggest difference in recent years is, and it sounds a bit daft to say it because we should always have been thinking about the learner in the classroom, but it is very much focused on the learner, where that child is, where they need to be and how we can get them there. And it's not about the teacher doing that to the child or the child doing that on their own. It's about a partnership in the classroom that involves not only the teacher and the young person, but also the other people, the other young people in the class as well. And another big thing about that involvement of the learner in the assessment is the opportunities we're trying to give them to reflect on their own learning through self-evaluation, through peer evaluation, but also through the profiling process.
What really impressed me was that you actually in 10 years were able to reform Scottish approach of learning in such a dramatic, I would say, way, such a huge way. And I am really grateful that I can see that in action, I mean in school, in primary and secondary, and that is really working. I mean, all that theory we read about, it's really working in the class.
I have very happy that I can see how Scottish school and people and system have knowledge, information and mental activity on every step.
The fact that we saw things on the wall, written on the wall, that in Flanders the teachers note in their books and in their preparations, but here it's shared with the children, with the pupils, and that I think it's, we have to consider that.
I have on the head a big suitcase with good ideas, and I wish shared with my colleagues in my school.
And it's very useful to see how teachers from other countries and especially from Scotland you have very special and good experience. And secondly, I wanted to see on systemic level and to discuss the system level how you support teachers. Yeah, as was told before.